radio and podcast streaming live on KUHSdenver.com. Today we have on Miss Sarah Willoughby. Such an interesting and intriguing and hard story that becomes a great story. But that's why we do the show, right? So often we want to talk about the stuff that we've been through, because then we're able to share it with others and hopefully guide others through maybe not having to go through all the junk that we went through. So, Sarah, thanks for being here.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, this is going to be really good. We've been talking a lot about women's hormones, a little bit about men's hormones, and all of the different stages that we go through. But it has been a while since we have talked about fertility and how difficult sometimes it is when we're going through the process of trying to grow our family. So I'll start with this. We need to start our show with gratitude, but this is the book. And I love the title of this book so much, How Infertility Saved My Life. So, not how, just infertility saved my life. But, music. See, it's always something. There we go. Music is down. So, all right. Anyway, this is such an inspiring book, and you have such an inspiring story. So I think, as always, we start the show with gratitude. So what are you grateful for today?
I'm really grateful that my beautiful daughter, who's just been in hospital, has come home.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
So it's a pretty big one. But yeah, she's had a really rough journey the last month with her health. They finally found out what's wrong, and she's finally got the treatment she needs, and she should be okay. So
good.
a big piece of gratitude for me this morning.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I can't imagine. So we'll continue to pray for you and for your daughter. It's a scary thing. So, excuse me. I have had this cough for weeks now. It's just this junk sitting in my throat. So, forgive me as I continue to work through this. But anyway, what am I grateful for today? I think really what I'm grateful for is we've had such unseasonably warm weather that it gets me so excited to think of the warm weather that's to come. And we're heading to Mexico in a month, so that's going to be nice and warm. It's been really, really beautiful, like pushing 70 degrees in January in Denver, Colorado, which is kind of unheard of. So it's a great thing to have a little reprieve from the cold. It's really fun. So that's what I'm grateful for. So let's do this. Sarah, let's start with just talking a little bit about your story and your history. And it's so true, and it's so hard when we have to go through the junk, but what a blessing it is to others when you can share your story and share your gifts and your lessons and your book to help others who hopefully don't have to deal with that. We're in this place right now where so many couples, it's men and women, are struggling with infertility and PCOS and hormonal issues, and just going through the process of trying to understand why. So let's talk a little bit about you.
Okay, well, let me take you back to, I used to live in the UK, so you can probably tell by my accent, I've got a bit of a half Aussie, half English accent, and I lived there for the first 31 years of my life. And I had a very academic upbringing, and I spent 6 years at university and worked my way up the corporate ladder working in human resources. I had a beautiful little boy that was conceived very easily, and I had no reason to believe that it was going to be any different for my future children. But PCOS, in its true form, came in and set me up for years of just secondary infertility, loss, grief, trauma. And even though at the peak of my story, which I'll come on and share in a second, I nearly lost my life, as you mentioned at the beginning, I have such gratitude for my journey, because without that journey, I would have led a life that lacked resonance, a life that was not meant for me. And so that's why my book is called Infertility Saved My Life. It didn't literally save my life, it nearly cost me my life, but it saved me from a life that was just not one that I was prepared to leave behind at that point. I was allowing fear to keep me stuck. So I had this beautiful little boy. He was born 2 months prematurely. That was pretty scary. I was giving birth for real. At the same time, I was supposed to be having my antenatal class on how to give birth, so I had no idea what I was doing. I was told that he may not survive, and got through all of that, and then very quickly wanted to have another child. I adored my little boy, but the universe had other plans, and I ended up having, after 2 years of trying to conceive, I ended up having a missed miscarriage, which I didn't even know what that was.
Yeah, let's talk about that. When you're ready, I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, we can talk about it now. So a missed miscarriage is when your body is still releasing all the pregnancy hormones, your body still thinks you're pregnant, the sac is still growing, but the baby's heartbeat has stopped. So typically you find out when you go for your ultrasound that your baby died a number of weeks before. And then the challenge is that your body still continues to release the pregnancy hormones, and the sac continues to grow, and you don't know when you're actually going to have a natural miscarriage. So I made the decision at that point to go into hospital, have a D&C, worked through all of that, and that was pretty traumatic, but I wasn't prepared to give up. I was very determined that I was going to be able to complete my family. I tried lots of different drugs, lots of different fertility treatments, none of it worked, and I eventually got referred to the fertility clinic, and eventually found out through my very first ultrasound. So I was diagnosed with PCOS when I was 12.
Wow.
But it took 13 years. I started having symptoms of PCOS when I was 12, but it took 13 years for me to actually be diagnosed. So I was 25 before I was actually diagnosed. So I'd suffered with these symptoms and being dismissed by doctors for 13 years, and sadly, that's very common. So I had this ultrasound for the very first time when I was in my, very late 20s, trying to conceive a child, and the doctor just said to me, "You've got everything going against you and you need to go through IVF." So we made the decision to go over to Norway to go through an IVF cycle. I'd lost a lot of trust in the system in the UK. They'd done a lot of things that were not great and would have potentially led me to have another miscarriage. They gave me the wrong treatments, etc. So I sort of naively thought, Nikki, let's go to Norway, make it into a bit of a holiday, take the stress out of the 2-week wait. But my body didn't like the fertility drugs, and I ended up not just overstimulating, but hyperstimulating. And so I suffered from ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, which is actually really quite rare. So anybody who's going through IVF, I don't want to scare you with the next part of the story, but it was very confronting. My body started to shut down. The doctors couldn't do anything to stop the deterioration. They could only treat the symptoms as they arose. So I was dealing with an enlarged heart. I had fluid on my lungs. Goodness. I couldn't breathe. I'd put on just multiple kilograms of fluid because everything was leaking into my stomach and into my lungs. And I watched my 3-year-old son walk out of the hospital doors to return to the UK, and I didn't know whether I would ever see him again. And that was the most vulnerable I have ever felt, because I realised I was in control of nothing for the first time in my life, and I couldn't change what was happening to me physically because the doctors were in charge of that, but I could work on my mindset. So this mindset battle began. I was determined that I was going to watch my son grow up, and very, very blessed that I got that second chance at life.
It is truly fascinating that you can go through a process that seems like a fairly normal, natural process, which I don't think that IVF is a normal, natural process, but it's done all the time, right? and to almost lose your life from something like that, so scary. um, I want to go back a little bit, and talk about PCOS specifically, because I think a lot of people struggle with it. A lot of people don't know they struggle with it. I think it's fairly misunderstood. And the fact that you had it from such a young age is, I just don't know that I've heard of anyone, and I don't work with a lot of kids, but I don't know that I've heard of anyone at that age started, struggling with PCOS. So what was that like? And let's talk about what PCOS is.